Hello, I'm Karen Stathoplos, and today I'm going to be reading some excerpts from a book that Valerie Reed gave me, my best friend, and she also does these readings. It's called My Love Affair with the State of Maine by Gertrude MacKenzie. It's basically about two girls in the 1950s who were successful ad executives in New York City, and they come to Maine and set up a store. It's so rewarding, and I'm only going to be able to read you little parts of it, but here we go. This is the story of my love affair with the state of Maine, which, like all love affairs, ran anything but smooth. Dorothy says it began on a night of crisp stars in early June when we were walking along the hard, chilly sand of Goose Rocks Beach with two cocker spaniels yipping hysterically around our ankles. Madison Avenue, traffic lights, zooming elevators, and the smoke and yammer of plush restaurants were all far away on another planet. We had dined that evening on Albion's small, tender lobsters, a new experience for me. I had eaten them big and broiled and dressed up in breadcrumbs and butter, but had never seen a lobster green and wriggling, nor tasted one so fresh from the sea. We had listened to some Dixieland records from Dorothy's collection, and now we were giving Imp and Spike their run before bed, as delighted as they with the unobstructed length of firm white beach and the salt-sweet breath of sand and beach grass and early wild roses. This is the life, I thought, and at that moment, Dorothy said out of nowhere, "Do you know, I'm almost tempted to buy the village store." To give you the full absurdity of her remark, I must tell you that Dorothy and I were refugees from the polished purlieus of the advertising agencies in New York. One of us was a little over 25 years old and the other a little under. Put us on the scale together in our Bermuda shorts and T-shirts and we would weigh about the same as one good-sized man. We knew how to talk business charmingly over 3 cocktails and lunch at 21. We knew how to spin out an advertising idea, make a market analysis, and sell a corporation vice president a promotion campaign that would cost $1 million across the board. Which is not the same as knowing how to sell 24 cases of canned beans, can by can, or get 5 cents more for one head of lettuce than another identical head. I was innocent of this difference at the time, so I was unaware of any absurdity in Dorothy's proposal. Correction. Her idea was not quite out of nowhere. Herb Atwood had put the question to her that afternoon when we were in Herb's store in the village. The store was in what had been the Atwoods' kitchen, and to me, coming in out of the sharp, clean daylight, it seemed overheated and airless. I didn't know that Clara Atwood's rheumatism was the reason for the pot-bellied stove blazing away and the tight-shut windows on a sunny June day. Herb was tall and thin and looked like Carl Sandburg in spectacles. His gold-rimmed glasses kept slipping down his thin, straight nose, and he kept pushing them up all the time he was talking. He talked about the hard winter, talked about Clara's rheumatism, and asked suddenly, "Dorothy, why don't you buy my store?" Dorothy thinks that's when it began. My own version goes back a few weeks to a cocktail party in New York. I had had a long business luncheon with several scotches at Theodore's, and after that a promotion party for some product or other, also with several scotches somewhere else. Toward evening, with a glass in my hand again, I said, "Enough! I'm getting out while I'm still in my right mind. I'm going to Arizona." "Why Arizona?" someone asked. I really didn't know, except that it was far away, underpopulated, and had neither skyscrapers nor subways. Across from me in the group stood Dorothy. She and I had been meeting on and off for some time in that glibly social climate in which Madison Avenue does business. She waited until everybody else had thoroughly canvassed the idea of escape, and then she said, "On your way to Arizona, why don't you stop off in Maine? It's far away, too, and there's a 3-mile stretch of beach with no one on it. I'm opening my house there next week." So, a few days later, I had quit my fine and well-paid job and was in Dorothy's bright red Packard convertible. Our luggage was stowed. Imp and Spike quivered between us in the front seat. I was on my way to Arizona via Maine. Dorothy, as she thought, was merely leaving New York for her usual summer in Maine. But I was running away from New York as far as I could go. I had had a bad fright. I loved my job. I loved my friends. I even loved my big, noisy, beautiful, ugly hometown. But one day, a man I had lunched with was dead of a heart attack at his desk an hour after we parted at my office door. Another day, a girl I knew in another office, as smart, as fast-talking, as brassy confident as I, was fired without notice because her agency had lost an account or two. A terrifically successful woman executive I knew took an overdose of sleeping pills. A man who had skyrocketed to vice presidency from home went from his analyst's office and jumped or fell from his Park Avenue apartment. All this in less than a month. The smooth machinery ran on without even a momentary shudder. Typewriters tapped, though other fingers touched the keys. Telephones rang, and other hands reached for the receivers under the same highly polished conference tables. Other well-creased Brooks Brothers trousers and other nylon ankles rested. Those who were gone and not missed. The waters closed over them as though they had never been. I was a girl who had no family left. I had been an only child. Home to me was one clever little apartment after another. I had achieved that pinnacle of independence people dream about, with nothing and no one to hold me down. For a girl like me, heart whole, fancy-free, having wonderful time and never a dull moment, it was like being hit by a diesel-motored trailer truck to realize that if anything happened to me, nobody would really care. I was not, of course, being quite fair to my friends, but that's the way I saw it. So I was running away from that chilly, fearful, lonely independence. I didn't know it, but I was looking for a place small enough to belong to a place where I was wanted and needed and would be missed if I went away, a place I could call home. I was to help Dorothy open her house, enjoy her hospitality for a few days, and then go on to the West. That was the deal. But I reckoned without the sea and the pine woods, the hot sun and the spank of the wind. I reckoned without Albion's lobsters. I reckoned without Herb Atwood's urgent wish to retire from storekeeping and the subtle ways by which a state of Maine gets his wish. I reckoned without the gambler behind Dorothy's soft, ladylike exterior and the gambler in me. I reckoned without the state of Maine, which gets a hold on you like an impossible man you can't live with and you can't live without. I couldn't understand how Herb Atwood had come to offer the store to Dorothy. Dorothy said, "Herb's had offers for the store, but he doesn't want to sell it to anyone who may not feel the way he and Clara do about Goose Rocks. The store sets the tone for the beach, you know. I've never made any secret of my interest in it. Every chance I've had, I've pumped Herb about the life of a storekeeper. And besides, he thinks I'm, well, a woman of property." Dorothy looked at me and added, "Of course, I couldn't run the store alone. I suspect Herb thought you might come in with me." Storekeeping? The thought was new and startling. But in the next breath I was wondering, could I swing it? And what would this do to my future plans? And then I remembered I had no future plans. Dorothy pointed out that if we went into it, I could spend the summer in Maine and make a living at the same time, and probably a good deal more than a living. If I didn't like it, she would buy me out and I would be no worse off financially than I was at the beginning. And storekeeping was, to both of us, brand new. That was the clincher. As we were climbing the stairs to our rooms a little before dawn, Dorothy asked defiantly, "Will you mind giving up Arizona?" And I realized that the thought of Arizona had not once entered my head since the day we arrived at Goose Rocks. Maine had me hook, line, and sinker. It took a week for Herb to make up his mind how much less he would take than what he had asked for the lawyers to agree on just what we were buying, and for the bank to decide on how much of a mortgage we and the property were good for. Herb had made up his mind to leave Goose Rocks on June 25th. and would close his little store the night before. "Then we'll open the big store the next morning," I announced brashly. "Oh, I wouldn't try to do that," Ben Beebe, the jobber from Biddeford, suggested. "You ought to give yourselves a little time. You need to transfer the stock from Herb's old place." "All right, 24 hours. What stock?" I wondered. What I had seen, I could move it myself in an hour. "What do you say, Dorothy?" 24 hours ought to be enough time, Dorothy agreed. "We don't want to leave the community without a store any longer than we have to." For whatever reason, Dorothy was with me in the fever to get going. I was bouncing with excitement. "Well, we've got 5 whole days from tonight." "There's quite a lot to opening a store," Ben Beebe murmured. We barely heard him. 5 days was enough time to get anything done. Now it was our last day. Four of our precious 5 days had flown by. Herb had closed his store at 10 o'clock the night before, and everybody had been dropping in to ask us when we planned to open. So the first thing we did that morning when we got to the store was to put a sign in the window, "Opening in 24 hours." We had come a long way. The place was shining, what one could see of it from the front, except for sawdust and shavings from Chris's carpentry. The refrigerator room and deep freezes were down to the proper temperature. Will had the machinery humming. The plumbing had shown its evil nature, and Andrew Austin had fixed it. There was ice in the ice room. You kept meats and dairies and cheeses in the electric refrigerator room, but you liked to keep fruits and vegetables where there was ice. The stock rooms were filling up. The small one had maybe 20 cases of Coca-Cola and 50 of soda pop. Eventually, we kept 27 different flavors and tobaccos, candies, and other small stuff. The big one was stacked helter-skelter with cases and tins of crackers, cereals, and packaged goods I never dreamed existed. What wouldn't fit in the stockrooms was beginning to collect in the middle of the store on our beautiful floor, painted like a deck in battleship gray. I had never, in my city incarnation, been up at 6 in the morning, except after a long night of club hopping, ending with a jam session in some hepcat dive. But 6 in the morning, when it's the beginning of a brand new day, rather than the end of an old one, is something to discover, and especially in Maine. There, the world is created brand new every morning. There's a pearliness about the sky and sea, translucent and faintly flushed like the pearly inside of a seashell you held in your hand when you were a child. And on the other side of the road, the pines march by, dark and somber and glistening, the aisles between their pillared trunks inviting you to explore. The air you breathe has a cool clarity like water from a spring, and it carries a variety of perfumes never captured in bottles labeled "Je reviens." The smell of moist green things in the earth they grow in, the fugitive scent of wild roses in the undercurrent of tangy pine, a whiff of sawdust mingled with lettuce and green onions and strawberries from the back of my own truck, and always the seasoning in Maine of the salt sea. A pinch of salt, as Dorothy maintains, in the kitchen, brings out the flavor of everything, even sweet things. Our days began to settle into a pattern. We crawled out of bed at 5:30 a.m. Dorothy took her bath at night, so while I bathed, dressed, and made our beds, she was already over the store starting the coffee. I followed Dorothy to the store, tossed a cup of coffee down if it was ready, called the dogs, and was off to market if it was one of my market days. By now, I bought produce enough for 2 or 3 days at a time. Dorothy, meanwhile, would wet mop the store floor until Henry offered to do it about the middle of the summer. That done, she began on the breakfast setups. From 8 o'clock on, she could expect about 100 art students to come rolling out of bed into the store for breakfast. Meanwhile, I was back from the market and ready to greet the milkman, bringing in the day's milk and cream and cottage cheese and cream cheese and taking the empty bottles. The bread man bringing in fresh bread and taking out the stale and giving credit for it, and I was signing their books and putting the milk and things in the refrigerator and bread on the counters. I hosed down the vegetables, priced them, and the fruits, put them on display in the store. At 7:30, it was time to open the store, and I had to drop whatever I was doing, set up the cash register, and unlock the doors. As soon afterward as I could, I got out of my jeans, which were streaked from the crates and spattered from the hose, and into fresh shorts, and I was ready for customers. I began each day with $43, enough pennies, nickels, dimes, quarters, and half dollars to make change, plus dollar bills and fives, and 110 happened to add up to that exact amount. The most astonishing discoveries were the ones we made about ourselves. Nothing we had ever done before had even touched our capacity for hard work. Whatever needed to be done, whatever time of day or night, we could do it. Either of us, or both. And if it was really hard, we made it easier by doing it together. I've heard people talk about how their feet hurt. I never say a word, because only a storekeeper knows how feet can hurt. You walk from the counter to the shelves and back, to the bins and back, to the deep freeze, the refrigerator and back. And then the customer remembers she needs eggs too, and you go to the refrigerator again and back. Sometimes Dorothy and I were sure we had walked 50 miles in the course of the day. We started at 6 in the morning, and when the store closed at 11 at night, we had an hour or more of work yet to do. It was the heels of our feet that really hurt, no matter what shoes we wore, flats with cushioned soft bottoms, rubber heels, or whatever. All the thousands of tap, tap, taps we made all day were stored up in our heels to rebuke us at night. Some nights, after we'd cleaned up and locked up, we walked out of the store with our loafers in our hands, across the road, across the beach, right into the water, and just stood there. But it was odd how our spirits were always ready to revive, even while the cold Maine water lapped around our feet, mercifully numbing them. One of us observed that it was a marvelous night, that the sky over Maine had more stars and brighter ones than anywhere else. And the other remembered some special piece of idiocy perpetrated during the day by a customer or by herself. And we walked out of the water and up to the townhouse, stifling our giggles so as not to wake the whole beach. In our little Victorian parlor, we lit a tiny fire, put the coffee percolator on, ate the snack Dorothy always remembered to bring from the store while I added up the day's accounts. We sat with our bare feet, reddened from the cold water, stuck out toward the fire. And as they warmed, we got sleepier and sleepier until we could just barely stand up and climb drowsily up the stairs. We muttered our good nights, went into our rooms, and asleep before we reached our beds. Those were good times. Now, the song I'm going to sing is from Porgy and Bess, written by George Gershwin, one of maybe my favorite summer song. He actually got the idea for this song when he and DuBose Hayward were collaborating on Porgy and Bess, and DuBose had written him a letter from somewhere in the South with just a little bit of a line saying, "Hush, little baby, don't you cry." And that made George Gershwin write this whole song. So here's a little music for you. Summertime and the living is easy. Fish are jumping and the cotton is high. Oh, your daddy's rich and your ma is good looking. So hush, little baby, don't you cry. One of these mornings you're gonna rise up singing. Then you'll spread your wings and you'll take to the sky. But till that morning, there's nothing can harm you. With Daddy and Mammy standing by. It's summertime. Thank you.